My name is Ernie Humphrey. I'm the Vice President of Educational Programs for Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar today. Corporate Performance Management, Scorecards and Dashboards that drive results. Companies have access to more and more data, and as such are challenged in leveraging the data to identify areas of operation that impact company performance and creating metrics that allow them to effectively manage these areas of operation. What information and metrics do finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals really want and actually need? How is the technology leveraged to consolidate, analyze, and deliver metrics and dashboards that offer the right data to company leaders? We will discuss these items today and more. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we will hear a presentation from our featured speaker, Tim Weeks, and we'll move into our interactive Q&A session, where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get to all of them, but we'll do our best and we'll follow up afterwards on any questions that we did not get to during the webinar today. I would like to thank Profex, our today's sponsor, whose commitment to thought leadership helps us make this event and everything else we do at Proformative free and possible. A few more logistical notes about today's webinar. A link to today's presentation and video will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours and will be posted on Proformative.com for free download. Those of you who like CPE credits through NASBA will need to answer all of the polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credit on the way in. For any questions regarding CPE credits, please contact Chris Brower at cbrower@Proformative.com. Don't worry, we'll have her contact information up again on our last slide in the presentation today. Again, we'd like this to be an interactive presentation for you, so please ask questions at any time via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel anytime during the event. We'll get to your questions during the Q&A panel discussion at the end of the event. You'll be asked to take a short survey regarding today's webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding our event today, as we always strive to improve the ROI for each and every event that we offer to our valuable constituency. A few words about Proformative. Proformative is the largest and fastest growing online community and resource for senior level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related leaders. Proformative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice and insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges they face every day. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and introduce our featured speaker, Tim Weeks, Partner and Director of Scorecards, CFOwise. Tim brings unique entrepreneurial perspective to everything he does. He has owned and served as the President and CEO of 2 organizations and served as CFO and senior executives in several others. In addition to designing and implementing accounting, finance, shipping, and inventory systems, Tim has also raised debt and equity capital, developed pricing strategies to maximize margins and cash, maintained information and other technology systems, and assisted with SEC filings. Tim earned a bachelor's degree in accounting from Brigham Young University and is a licensed CPA in the state of Colorado. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to Tim Weeks. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Ernie, and thank you to Proformative for the opportunity of being here. As Ernie mentioned, I'm a partner with CFOwise. We provide part-time outsourced CFO products and services to small and mid-sized businesses. The last 18 months has been a very exciting time for us as we've been on a journey to transform the way that we provide products and the types of products that we provide to our clients. And so we'd like to share a few lessons that we've learned along the way today. This is a very exciting time for companies of all sizes, as the ability to do scoreboards and scorecards, dashboards has really provided a great opportunity for any organization. You're going to hear me today refer to everything as scoreboards. We see that as a blend of both scorecards and dashboards, and for our clients it makes a lot of inherent sense. So whether you're in a large organization or a small organization, I believe the principles that we'll talk about today will provide some great value. We're going to jump into something kind of fun to start with. Let's talk about the lessons that we can learn from sports. This first one's kind of a fun question. How many minutes are actually played in an NFL football game? You may have seen it flash up there real quickly. An NFL game would last about 3 hours on television. You'd waste a good amount of your time on some of what they show. The question is, how many minutes from the time that they snap the ball to the time the whistle is blown are the players actually playing? You might be surprised. The answer is 11 minutes. Now, the game actually runs for 4 15-minute quarters, but only 11 minutes of that time are you actually watching the players play. So that brings up the question of what are they doing the rest of the 2 hours and 49 minutes. Here's an example of what they're doing during those 3 hours. The first thing that jumps to mind is that hour of commercials that makes you kind of grateful for the DVR today. When I saw the 11 minutes, my first vision that I had was a picture of a lineman running down and then afterwards being on the bench with his oxygen. But really only 11 minutes. Now, there's not a whole lot of application to that, but let's talk about if you're an NFL owner or an NFL coach, what is the greatest predictor of determining whether or not you win the game? Now, for those of you who immediately go to the, well, of course, it's whoever has the most points at the end of the game, let me frame it a little differently. How do you determine which team is going to have the most points at the end of the game? The number one predictor for that is fewer turnovers. You'll notice here that 78% of the time, the team with the fewest turnovers will win the game. That even increases if it's the home team, 83%. Ironically, the second best predictor of the winner is the more rushing yards, which is interesting because for most fans, we want to see passing. But for an NFL owner or team, they understand the importance of those metrics. Now, I took a quick look to see, I'm going to ask throughout this presentation the question, therefore, what does it matter? To an NFL coach, this greatly matters. I noticed that I took a look at the top 8 highest paid coaches in the NFL. The difference between the highest paid and the 8th highest paid was about $2 million per year, and yet their winning percentage, the highest paid coach won 0.6 more games per year than the 8th highest paid coach. And so every win in an NFL game is incredibly valuable. All right, let's take a look at the NBA. Just an interesting fact, how many calories does an average NBA player burn during a game? The answer to that is 860 calories. He runs approximately 3 miles on average, an NBA forward would, compared to a couple miles in college. Now, if you're trying to predict the outcome of an NBA game, what's the most important factor? Would you focus on offense, on defense, on free throws? The answer to that, and now we're talking about NBA here, so don't get confused by field goal conversion. We're talking about the percentage of baskets made compared to shots. But the percentage of shots made by the team is the greatest predictor. It is 3 times more important as the second predictor, which is the average 3-point conversion of the opposing team. The last line is the one I think is very significant. For every 1% increase in the percentage of baskets made, the chance of winning increases 8%. So just an interesting, again, predictor. If we're trying to figure out how do we predict whether or not we're going to win a game, we're going to talk later about predicting whether or not our companies are winning. And finally, what is the average life of a baseball in Major League? How would you measure that? Would you measure that in terms of innings or hits? The answer is pitches. The average baseball lasts 6 pitches. The home team has to provide quite a large number, and compare that to 12 hockey pucks that are used during an NHL game. Now, if you're trying to predict, again, the winner of a Major League Baseball game, pitching is the most important. Again, fans are there to usually see the home run hitter and like batting, but it's actually the pitching that really matters. The pitcher's earned run average, or ERA, is the best predictor. The second is a very similar measurement. Now, just one interesting note, I'm actually a big fan of soccer. That's a sport I've grown up playing my whole life. I tried to look for the best predictor in a soccer game, and there really isn't one. It turns out that things like weather and injuries and disciplinary actions make it too difficult to predict. And so that's probably one of the reasons why it's not such a fan favorite here in the U.S. My wife and I, last year, were out of town. We were having dinner, and there was a TV at the restaurant. And at the time, I was knee-deep in building scoreboards for our clients. And so I started noticing scoreboards wherever I was. And I noticed on the TV that this game was going on. It was the St. Louis Cardinals playing the Philadelphia Phillies. And they were in the beginning stages of the playoffs. And this wasn't this exact moment. This is the best screenshot. I apologize, it's a little blurry, but this is the best I could find. One of the interesting things is on that screen, that takes up a very small percentage of the screen, and yet it provides a lot of data. So just take a minute and look at what you know about what's happening at this game. There's quite a few measurements that are given. There's actually 9 different items that we learn, from teams, the score, who the home team is, who's up to bat. Now, if you understand baseball, which I'm not a huge baseball guy, but understand a little bit. If you're looking at this game at this moment, you're probably interested in sitting down and watching the game at this moment. Now, those data points are great, but now really comes the question of therefore what? What does it matter? What would we do at this point? I showed this in a training session a little while back, and we had in the room a former college baseball player. It was really fun to hear his analysis of what's happening behind the scenes, what the manager is considering at this time. He brought up that the tying run is on second base. The batter is actually the go-ahead run. It's the top of the fourth, and so it might be a little too early to be making changes to the batter, to the pitcher. But all of that's happening and going on in relation to this game at this point. And so really those who understand what's happening, control, and those of us in our companies have the opportunity to look at that data and really determine what decisions, what strategy are we going to implement at this point. Now, as a side note, St. Louis actually was a couple runs behind at this moment, but they came back to win this game. They went all the way to the World Series, and in Game 6, they actually were 2 runs down in the bottom of the ninth, came back to tie it up. The Rangers at that point were 1 pitch away from winning the World Series. St. Louis won that Game 6, went into the 10th inning, down 2 runs again, came back to win the game, and then won the game in Game 7 to win the World Series. So these things matter, and as we look at how we compare or what lessons we can learn, here's a few thoughts. First of all, scoreboards become more valuable to us, to our teams, to our leaders in our organizations over time. As a principal, when we meet with our clients for the very first time to show them their scoreboards, we prep them right off the bat that the first time that we look at these scoreboards, there's going to be far too much information to really understand and to really get the strategy from. And so we start that first one with hitting the most important pieces, and then over time our clients have the ability to understand each of their scoreboards and what the measurements tell them and what decisions they need to make. So scoreboards can bring a lot of clarity, a lot of peace of mind to leaders throughout the team. And again, as we apply that sports measurement to it, it gives us the opportunity over time to really better understand it. Now, what should be measured? We're going to talk about this in more detail as we go throughout today, but there is one key piece to that, and that is you. Each of us in our organizations or with our clients are the greatest tool or asset that the organization has to really determine what should be measured. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we go about doing that and some thoughts from some of the studies that we've been provided. Next is defining the opponent. It's pretty obvious in sports. We look to the other side, we see the team that's in the other colored shirts. When it comes to our companies or organizations, it's not enough for us just to look at historical data. We need to look at historical data and current real-time data in terms of targets and goals, forecasts, and budgets to make sure that we are on track to meet the goals of the organization in the long run. Next is predictors of success. We looked at that for the sports teams. We have been historically very good at providing financial statements, the P&L, the balance sheet, statement of cash flows, even budgets and forecasts based on history. But those can take some time. Even with some of the really impressive close rates that we're seeing in certain organizations, we still need to be able to answer the question of did we win or lose today? Did we win or lose this week? And so as we get into our scoreboards in our organizations, identifying how we can track that on a daily, weekly basis is really important. And then finally, therefore, what if our scoreboards simply are beautiful to look at, or we're really impressed with the technology we've implemented and it's not leading to good strategic decision making, then we've really missed the point of what we're trying to accomplish with that. We're trying to give the right metrics at the right time to the right people to allow them to lead the organization and make sure that they're making good, timely decisions. With that, I think it's time for a polling question, Ernie.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Tim. So as Tim mentioned, we're going to go ahead and launch our first polling question. For those of you in the audience, we'd love to have every single person in the audience answer the polling questions. We use this benchmarking data, and we share that on Proformative.com. For those of you in the audience, after CPE credits, you're going to have to answer each and every one of our polling questions. This afternoon, just want to make a note. As we have these 3 polling questions, we'll be having them up pretty quickly so we don't take up too much of the opportunity we have for Tim's great knowledge. For those of you in the audience who are Ranger fans, I have to apologize if that last slide was a little bit painful for you. That one out away. So, and I'm very excited for this content because as a practitioner, I've always heard a lot about scorecards and dashboards, and we're very fortunate to have the opportunity for Tim to introduce to our audience the practical applications, where we're at in this area, and also where we're going. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this poll in about 15 seconds or so. Again, all of you in the audience who are after CPE credits, you'll have to answer these polling questions. We'll be having 2 more polling questions. And also, if you have any questions at any point, please enter those in the questions area of the control panel. We want to have an interactive session for us. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to go ahead, Tim, navigate us to the next slide. And if you would go ahead and left-clicking your screen, you should have control back, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, I was speaking with John of Proformative earlier in the week, and he actually wanted me to use the San Francisco Giants example, but unfortunately I think it was a sweep if I remember correctly, so it probably wasn't quite as much drama as there was the year before. These are the 3 principles that we want to talk about today. Okay? The first one is building your company's scoreboards. I'd like to show some examples of what we've done, kind of a quick flyby so you can see what current technologies are providing us today. The second is some ideas on determining the metrics for your organization. And then finally, some thoughts on who in the organization can benefit from scoreboards. So this next slide will show kind of some of the examples of what we've done in the past. And perfect. So historically, we have provided primarily packages, probably similar to what we've done you've done in your organizations in the past. A lot of Excel-based reports. We would bring those into Acrobat Pro and mark them up with comments and try to identify trends and important key metrics for our clients to use. We'd certainly utilize the charts in Excel and provide some graphic-based opportunities there. That next slide will show that. Now, back at the beginning of 2011, we entered the year with a goal to change the way we provided information to our clients and the way that we helped them really understand what was happening inside their company. So we started researching some software companies. We actually researched 18 different software providers that were providing some level of scoreboards and that kind of software that would allow us to do that. Because of how we serve our clients and because we have the need to be able to implement the technology across all of our clients, we had several requirements. The first one was we did not want to manage any servers, so it needed to be cloud-based. We're not IT people. We don't even have an IT staff or a single person on staff that can help us with that. So we needed to leave that in the hands of the experts. Second, we wanted to ensure that it did not require any software to be installed on our clients' computers. We didn't want to get in the business of trying to continually upgrade and make sure they were on the latest, greatest version. Third was we needed to make sure that our clients could access the information online through whatever browser they chose. We wanted to make sure as long as they had an internet connection, they could get to their scoreboards and see their information. And then finally, and probably most important, was that we wanted our CFOs to be able to build the scoreboards. We didn't want to put ourselves in a position where we needed to rely on an IT staff or a programmer and try to communicate what our needs were. And so we selected one that we felt best fit our needs. I will say that of those 18, we were just so impressed with so many of them and could see the application of each of them in so many different organizations. So I don't think that there's a single right answer as we look at this. But we're pretty excited about what we were able to accomplish. We selected, and in May we started learning how those scoreboards were built. We actually started building around. Our founder had written a book called Impact Your Business, and in the business he talks about the 6 scoreboards that every business needs. And so what we were tasked with doing was building out those sets of scoreboards. And so we started the process in May. By October of last year, we started rolling out our first version 1.0 of those scoreboards. So at this point, we're just over a year into the lessons that we've learned and what we've been able to provide. I'm going to show, this is a video, and I'm going to show this and try to talk through this a little bit. I think it's about 4 minutes long. It'll give you just a really quick flyby of the types of things that we've been able to accomplish. I do it simply so you can get an idea of what today's software technology is doing. Now just keep in mind, again, that this was built all by CFO and finance people, so what you're seeing was not, we did not need to rely on an IT department, and we were able to do most of this on our own with a little bit of help from training from the software company. So as I start this, you can see this first, let's see, and Ernie, I may need you to hit the play button on that.
Let me go ahead and jump in there. There we go.
Perfect, thank you. So this first one that you'll see is probably a typical what you'd expect a KPI scoreboard to look like, where we're measuring certain items that are of importance. You know, looks like, okay, now we're playing. So we're able to, within these scoreboards, we can hit different periods. We can look at different metrics. Let's try to. Okay, there we go. So we can look at different periods. We can look at different metrics. The software gives interactivity between periods, pops up pieces of information. We're able to drill down on it and compare different metrics to each other. So again, this is probably something similar to what large organizations have had for some time, but again, this was done on the cloud, accessible from any internet platform. We're able to do things like pivot on facility or department. And again, we could do this from really the smallest organizations to the largest organizations. Obviously, challenges exist with different complexities of data structure coming into these, but we believe that this could fit the bill for really a very wide range of companies. Very quickly, we're able to build in targets. We can look and compare things. In this case, we're comparing competitors, so we can look and see how they're performing in certain key areas very quickly. Much of it, as you highlight over it, will do things like that. You'll notice the speedometers moving. The next one is just a sample of what we would term as our daily scoreboard, the 3 most important metrics to an organization. And with this, we can see what our goals are. We really like the calendar feature that lets you look to see either historically or in the future how, historically how you performed. We'll use it in cash flow forecast to see upcoming peaks and valleys of cash. This one is an example of a cash flow forecast. Green indicates appropriate cash, blue is excess cash, red's negative cash. So we can set targets and really customize based on your organization and what the needs are. We can quickly in any of these see the trends and see what's happening over time. It's important to capture where we are today, but also important which direction we're trending. We're able in this one to bring industry data in, and we can compare the company's performance side by side with both the industry and a target group within that industry, and really see how do we compare to those who are competing with us. The target group allows us to select companies that are kind of like our clients, and again, we've got historical data that we can pivot on. The next one, this one, we'll get a brief view, but this is what we call our launch deck. One of the things that we struggled with is trying to make sure that our clients were continually thinking about going and looking at their scoreboards, and so we created what was a kind of a home page feel. It gives them quick links to things like their Google Calendar and other items, and helps them to kind of see find the scoreboard that they're looking for. This is an example of a balance sheet where we're taking very important ratios, current ratios, debt to equity, working capital days, and really giving them targets so they can you can set for your organization where does your company need to be in these various measurements that we do. Again, you can look at historical data, trending data, and then what we can do is we can drill down to the detail. Now, it's not intended, of course, to be a transactional system. We don't drill down to every little detailed transaction, but we can look at what's feeding into these different metrics and ratios. We can look at the relationship. For example, we'll look at current assets and what makes up those current assets. Pie charts gives us percentages of inventory versus cash and AR and so forth. Again, always with the ability to see trends that are occurring in the future. And then finally, we'll look at a P&L, some examples of ways that we're showing our clients the P&L. They'll see track current or key measurements like gross margin. We can see over time how they're performing in total expenses, revenues, and again, setting targets for all that. Again, we can drill down further, and then even beyond that, we can really look at, we've put together some 5-year forecasts where people can change assumptions and see. So hopefully, I know it's a very quick flyby, but hopefully that gives you kind of a feel Again, this is a very reasonably priced software package that CFOs and finance people have been able to execute on. So there's several benefits that we found of these online scoreboards. There's two that have been really significant. The first one is the amount of time it takes for us to prepare for our client meetings. For you, it would be the amount of time that it takes for you to prepare for your executive meeting with your team. In the past, that could take some time to go through those packages. You know, we're looking at spreadsheets, trying to identify trends, trying to identify weaknesses, confirming whether or not our past decisions are performing the way we expected them to. Now it's very quickly we can key on the most important pieces of a client's business and really be prepared for that meeting very quickly. The second is a similar result, and that is with our clients themselves, as we sit down with them, the ability to help them understand the really important key pieces of information for their company has been really critical. I received a call a couple months ago from one of our partners. He serves a particular client that has 3 different entities, and typically their monthly meeting will last about 6 hours. He called me after one of those meetings and was really excited. He said, Tim, I just finished my meeting with the client, and it took us about 15 to 20 minutes of looking at the scoreboards and reviewing them together before we were on to strategy and understood exactly what we needed to do. He said in the past, getting to the point where we start discussing strategy would usually take about an hour and a half, maybe even longer. And so really that ability for not only us to understand what's happening within the company, but also that ability to help our team members, our clients, or whoever we're serving to really better understand what's happening, to look for weaknesses, signs of strength, signs that what we've done in the past are working, or maybe changes in our business model. So again, just a very quick information. As we looked at those companies, we feel like there's several of those companies out there who really could provide this kind of quality in the scoreboarding efforts. But it's so great that now we can launch that in the smallest of companies and the largest of companies, and we can fit whatever the needs are into the budget of that organization. With that, Ernie, I think we're back to our next polling question.
All right. Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and launch our next polling question. Again, we'd like to have everyone's participation in the audience in the polling question. Those of you in the audience who are after CPE credits, you'll have to answer this polling question in addition to our last polling questions as well. We're starting to get questions in. We'd like to get as many questions as possible in, and I think that content so far has been very compelling. And I just want to make a note that one of the purposes of the event is to demonstrate the best-in-class technology. So we think CFOwise has a great best-in-class technology. There may be others out there, but it's more about what's possible and getting our members out in front on that leading-edge technology. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this poll up for another 15 or 20 seconds, and then I'll go ahead and hand that control back over to Tim. So I'll give us 10 more seconds or so. Again, any questions, please get those in the questions area, and we'll have plenty of questions queued up for Tim in our Q&A section of the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question here, get us to our next slide, and then let's see. Tim, go ahead and left-click on your screen. You should have control back. Go ahead, Tim. Take it away.
Thank you, Ernie. So this last summer, I went to a users conference for the software provider that we used, and it was interesting to me as I sat through several of the training sessions. We had folks from all different parts of different organizations. We had IT people there, we had operations folks, we had finance and accounting people. And the one question that came up and was asked to several of the presenters during that time was, how do we know what to track? We've got this great software tool now, and someone in our organizations has put them in charge of it, and they were trying to find out, now what do I do with this? What's important to track? That's probably one of the most difficult questions each of us has. We have a little bit of information, but not a ton on it. Unfortunately, as I've researched the process for determining what those metrics are, unfortunately, this is what step one usually sounds like. Step one, identify the metrics. Well, I think our whole point is we want to know how do we identify the metrics, and yet nobody really gives us a whole lot of information about it. Many of us are familiar with the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, and in that, we probably remember the 3 intersecting circles, and the great companies were the ones that found the connection between all 3 of those. And one of those circles is what drives your economic engine. He gave some examples. They were all for the great companies they found. Not all of them were willing to say that there was one key identifier, but some of them were able to say there's one great identifier. And it was always a profit per X number. For Pitney Bowes, it was per customer. Kroger, interesting, is profit per local population. Now, I don't think that the research or that Jim was trying to suggest that there's only one number that we track in a company, and certainly that's counterintuitive to what we've learned and read about when it comes to scorecarding. But certainly it's important for us to identify those kind of 1 to 3 really key numbers. Now, profit per X is a great number, but it misses the quantity driver, the velocity number. So if Kroger, for example, they could have their profit per local population number maybe staying the same, but what's happening if their population is dropping? They may still be able to keep that number up, but if the volume is being lost, maybe it's not supporting their organization any longer. So the important thing for us is to kind of have a framework. Now, we do learn 2 things from Good to Great. 2 quotes, I won't read them all, but notice the very top line here. The denominator can be quite subtle, sometimes even unobvious. So as our role as the finance and accounting professionals in our organizations, we're the ones that need to start leading that discussion. And really, I think what he's saying is the process wasn't always easy to identify what that number was. Notice in the second one, I underlined intense dialogue and debate. It appeared that in those organizations that were able to do that, and even in some of the organizations that weren't able to identify just one, it appeared that there was a process and there was much debate. The executive team spent time talking about it and trying to determine what it is. I think for us, what's important is looking at it as a kind of an onion. That first time that we take a shot at it, as we peel away that first layer of the onion, it might be helpful. It may not be the core of what we're trying to get to. But if we can give ourselves the opportunity to understand that really we're in a process to really identify what those numbers are. Good to Great did teach us that those companies that were really able to nail down some of those key identifiers, it really helped them get that robust economic growth that they desired. The interesting thing about Good to Great is there's only a couple of pages that even discuss this. So as big of a principle as it probably was to a lot of us, we didn't get a lot of insight into that process. But again, that process is it really comes down to you and your team and working with your team to identify that. Now, we have taken a methodology for what we're putting on our scoreboards that I'd like to give you, again, a brief explanation of. Again, they were based on the book that our founder wrote called Impact Your Business. So 3 of our sets of scoreboards are based in the past, the monthly indicators, weekly and daily, and 3 are looking forward, 5-year forecasts, annual forecasts, and quarterly forecasts. As we look at the history ones, when we started the process and we started getting training, I remember we were in the training and our founder was giving us the challenge. He wanted to see what a P&L, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flows would look like on a scoreboard. And I remember listening to what his vision was and actually making the comment that I think what you're trying to accomplish, I don't think we can accomplish that. I'm not sure how well that's going to work. When we think of scoreboarding or dashboarding, we typically think of the weekly or daily indicators. We typically think of those things that we're measuring in real time. And yet we've found it's very effective to be able to put those 3 key financial statements up on a scoreboard. Along with that, we've added industry comparisons. Again, as we go back to what do we measure and who's our opponent, it's important for us to have those benchmarking. And today's technology, we've got some great third-party service providers that can get you your relevant industry data really, again, for a reasonable price and cost structure. So, and then with those 3 key financial statements, we're also providing the important performance and health ratios. Now, our weekly indicators is what we would be our application of a balanced scorecard. These would be the metrics for each department or discipline or team, or maybe they would be certain offices. Again, 1 to 3 of the most critical metrics for each of those groups. As we look at that, the question that, or the example that I would give is if you were stranded on a desert island with no contact with your team or your company, but once a week a bottle rolled up on the shore with a little scroll pieces of paper, what 3 metrics would you want to see from each of your groups or teams or disciplines that would give you a very clear vision of how the company is performing overall? So as you meet with and begin this discussion with each of the disciplines, again, start peeling away those layers and figuring out what, for those disciplines, not everything can be measured on a profit per X number. Not everything can be dialed down to profit. Obviously, if we focus too much on profit, but we quit focusing on customer service, then eventually that profit down the road is going to suffer. And so we have a lot of non-financial, more operational type metrics that we would track in these weekly indicators. And then finally, for the daily indicators, this is what we would boil down to more what Good to Great is trying to teach us, which is what are the 1 to 3 really key drivers of the company's economic engine overall. If we could only see 1 or 2 or 3 metrics, but wanted to be able to predict the success that we're going to have, whether or not we're on line to make our goals, what would those drivers be? Finally, for the future, the quarterly, our application is a 13-week rolling forecast of cash flows, availability of lines, other resources that are needed to keep the company going. And so one of the nice things for us in the application for us is we've really been able to help our clients predict cash flow and to be able to see into the future when those cash either excesses or cash reserves getting too low. And it gives them time, it gives us time to help strategize about how do we go and fix those peaks and valleys. The annual forecast is where we focus on the forecast or the budget or the plan and analyzing results to that plan with a real focus on analyzing the variances and taking those variances to our leaders of each of the teams that affect those outcomes and helping them make the transition or make the steps to get things back on track. Now, the 5-year forecast is really the crystal ball model, but with our clients, it's a really important thing for us to understand where they're headed. In each of our organizations, we have a growth plan. We have either the launch of new products and brands or lines. We have acquisition plans or divestitures or maybe full sellouts. Whatever those strategies may be, they should be indicated in the 5-year forecast. And that allows us then from there to start backing into the annual, which helps us back into the monthly, the weekly, and the daily. So if you're not sure where to start, a great place may simply be to say, where are we headed in 5 years? And to get there, what does this year need to look like? Okay, and what does each month in the year need to look like? And then boiling that down to the weekly and the daily. So if you're not sure just where to start at all, that may be a good place. A simple question. It doesn't, again, depending on the size of your organization, that may be a very complex process or it may be a very simple process. So now, I think we're not able to show this slide, but the little video that kind of talks about accounting is the video actually shows a translation, a guy that misses his translation. As we consider what our roles in our organization, among our partners and CFOs, we joke that we're often part psychologists, part trying to help family members get along. There's all kinds of roles that we play. One of the most important roles that we play is that of translator or interpreter. The technology is a great piece, and we're really excited about what's happening and what's available with the technology these days, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. The most important piece of the puzzle is you and your ability, our ability to translate results and what the finance accounting means to the rest of the team. And whether that's the executive team or that's a team leader and middle management, whether that's those on the ground, on the floor, wherever it may be, our ability to translate and help teach them what really matters to the organization's overall success is really a key part of that. So a couple of thoughts. Letting team members discover for themselves. One of the things that's been really interesting to us as we've launched these scoreboards with our clients is that one scoreboard or one approach just simply does not work for everybody. Even within one particular client, one approach doesn't work for everybody. So we have to be very creative in how we provide different types of scoreboards. One of the nice things about the technology we selected is it gives us a great deal of flexibility. So if we have certain pieces of a scoreboard that we want others to see, we can easily grab those pieces, throw them on another scoreboard, and under a different class level of license, they can have access to just certain pieces of that. One example, a couple months back, we had one client who's going under some financial distress, primarily because their business model is really changing. And so as we looked at how do we help them really discover for themselves what's happening, we printed report cards. We printed report cards for the financial statement, and instead of trying to just tell them, here's the result and here's what it means, we said, okay, here's what we're looking at. What do you think it means? Let's give the organization a grade. And it was a helpful exercise for them. There was probably some aha moments for them during those moments as they went through and really discovered for themselves. But we need to learn how to be creative and let them discover in those ways that really help them most. For most of us, we've been looking at spreadsheets and numbers for years and years and have the ability to pick out trends pretty easily, but not everybody sees that way. And if accounting is truly the language of business, just understand that for a lot of people it's a foreign language. And so we have to be the ones that really can help them interpret and better understand what's happening. Now, as you decide who's going to be part of the scoreboarding process, obviously you want to figure out who's going to be joining you as you build those scoreboards and metrics. And anyone who is a thought leader or really has great influence should be involved in that process. As you go to your disciplines, absolutely make sure that the heads of those disciplines are having a say, help communicate overall vision for the company, and then help them determine how their role fits into that overall vision. But I had an experience at the beginning of 2011 that kind of taught me, kind of reminded me of a great lesson. This was even before we were providing online scoreboards, but back when we were providing scoreboards nonetheless through Excel spreadsheets and other types of products like that. I have one client who had a number of facilities, and we had debated. These facilities were pretty mature facilities. We had managers that managed them, fairly simple, good, hardworking people. They weren't sales type. They didn't have any training in trying to really increase revenues or grow. So the discussion was really whether or not they could have a major impact on each of their facilities. And so we entered 2011 and we said, well, let's try it. Let's see what happens if we put a really good incentive program in place, make them very incentivized. They had the opportunity to really increase their compensation for the year. And we put it in place, and we gave them a very basic scoreboard, and we showed them how to go keep their scoreboard updated so they could do it themselves. It was remarkable what happened. It was a reminder to us that sometimes even people that we don't think have great influence in the organization truly do. At the end of 2011, we received a 10 times return on additional compensation. We ended the year, I asked the client, what do you want to do this year? And he said, well, obviously, I want to try it again. And so we implemented it again, and this year we're on track to do 6 times, again, return even beyond what we did last year. So, so just a reminder that as you consider who has influence on those various operational metrics and financial metrics, get them included, give them access, and let them be able to see the scoreboards of those metrics that they really influence. And finally, there are those outside of our organizations who could benefit. Earlier this year, I met with one of my clients' banks. We were asking them for a line of credit about 6 times what they were currently providing. And so we got in front of them even before the application process and said, hey, listen, here's our needs. We have reasons for it. We had POs from big box stores that were making commitments to us. We knew what we needed. And so we sat down. As we looked at the metrics on the balance sheet and the P&L, he was able to identify for us the weaknesses and basically his limitations of what he could and couldn't do. That led us to a strategic discussion about how the company was organized and some things that we could do that really opened up some of those metrics and allowed us to be able to do that. Now, we didn't end up with 6 times the number. We ended about 4 times the number with that bank. But there are certain partners and bankers and vendors and other people that work with your organization that can really benefit from a very well put together scoreboard highlighting the really important and key stuff that's happening within your company. All right, just to finalize, just a couple of best practices and things to avoid. The first idea is just get started. That may sound very simple, but there's a lot of organizations we feel like, boy, if we don't do it right the first time, we've blown it. Let go of the idea that you're going to nail it the first time. It's simply going to take time. Just like peeling back that onion, you're going to get started. It's going to take you a while to really dig in and really get it right. But that's okay. Just get started and let the process go from there. As you're choosing your technology and your metrics, just understand that your first time is going to be a rough draft. We've built scoreboards and thrown them away and started over because they didn't fit. They weren't really leading to strategic thinking. With your organization, you're going to have a set of personalities on your team that are going to be diverse, and so you need to continue to work until that's right. So if you're working with your IT department, make sure that the IT department knows that they need to be flexible, that this is going to change. You're taking your best guess at first, but it's going to change. And then again, just a reminder, be patient. Everyone learns a different way, and so your skill and ability to really, again, interpret, help them really teach them what's happening and give them the opportunity to explore and learn for themselves is really a critical thing. Now, scoreboards must be accessible physically and intellectually. I showed earlier our launch deck, and that came about as we were kind of frustrated that some of our clients were not accessing their scoreboards as often as we had hoped, and so we wanted to put it first and foremost in their minds continually. So we wanted it when they open up a browser, it gave them the opportunity to log in and see things. So make sure that it's easy. The more clicks or files, or if you're emailing things and they have to open it, so many of us now are accessing things on our mobile devices that sometimes that doesn't come through and it's not very readable. One of the things I meant to mention earlier with our technology is this software provider also allows us to review them on tab devices, iPad, Samsung, any of those. It's a little hard to read from a practicality standpoint. You can access it on your iPhone, other smartphone, but it's a little bit hard to really understand what's happening. But from an iPad standpoint, we use those all the time. And then finally, a couple things to avoid. One of the things that was really clear to me as I was at that users conference this summer was that there were some who were coming from the IT department where management had just said, hey, we want a dashboard, so here you go, build something for us. And so they were left trying to figure out what do we measure, what's critical organization, where are we headed. That really needs to be led by the finance, accounting, executive team, so make sure that you take the lead on those. And design, we have had times where we built something, thought it looked great, sat back and said, is it helpful, is it useful? The answer is no, and so make sure that that's the standard by which you're building. And then again, viewing scoreboards as tools for management only, we need to get these all throughout the organization. Find everybody that has influence on the company. Find a way to get them a way to measure what they do. Let them, most people in our organizations want to feel like they're doing a good job and want to have a way of measuring that. So give them the opportunity to measure that. And then finally, if there's one thing that will kill a scoreboard effort, it's we launch with bad data. So if there's anything that we really do need to make sure that it's at least accurate, it's the data. The second that we start feeding information to scoreboards that's inaccurate, it calls everything into question, and people either lose interest or worse, don't trust any of the stuff that we do on the second round. So that's probably the one piece where that we really have to be very good at getting it right the first time. Again, the rest of it, look at it as a draft process. You're just going to get better and better as you go with time. With that, Ernie, I think we're back to another polling question.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and launch our last polling question. As we do that, in order to take full advantage of the time that we have, we're going to go ahead and get the Q&A session started with Tim, so we take full advantage of the opportunity to have one of the leading experts in the country, probably has as much experience as anyone in dealing with scorecards for companies. First question is around when you're dealing with a lot of your clients and prospects, do you find when they're trying to get their scorecards together that they have more trouble looking backwards or looking forwards with their scorecards?
Well, that's a great question. I would say looking forward. I think a lot of the clients that we come in and work with, many of them have had difficulty really even getting some of the historical data in a meaningful way, but really helping them boil that down. We find that we really have to help walk our clients through that process of the forward-looking metrics that we measure. So I would say, unfortunately, the answer is both in a lot of cases, but certainly if one is more difficult, a more difficult challenge that as we've seen, it's definitely the future.
The next question is around what you see as the relationship between the financial and the operational data. When you're building when you've built successful scorecards, what does that mix look like between finance and operations data and metrics, and does that change by industry quite a bit?
That is going to be different for each industry, but I would say that if anything, we probably err too much on the side of the financials and don't give enough credence to the operational metrics. So I think it is important for us to make sure that that those operational metrics are really important. And I think that's the whole idea behind the balanced scorecard, is that we we're looking at holistically, not just finance. We can't boil everything down to a financial number, but we do know that there's certain operational metrics that are really key for long-term sustainable growth. We may not be able to measure customer service in exact dollars, but we can certainly measure it in how our customers are being treated. So that is going to change from industry to industry, but certainly it's a really good mix between the two. And I would say on those the weekly categories, when we launch those, I think that that's very heavy in the operational side. So probably less financials on those weekly calculations than the financial side.
Okay, great. Someone's asking an industry-specific question. You had experience working with nonprofits whose metrics might be a little bit different, and what would your advice be there?
This has been a topic we have been asked about a number of times in the last several months. I think I actually attended a not-for-profit conference here just a few weeks back and was listening to some of the challenges they face. And I think one of the things that they are really facing right now is the funding issues, and really funding sources have been a lot more difficult in the last few years for them. And so I think that they are trying to find better and better ways of really making sure that they give the best value to the people that they serve. We have not yet put together specific scoreboards for not-for-profits. It is on our list, and we hope to accomplish that in the next 6 months or so. But certainly those metrics are going to be very different. Certainly they have a whole different set of problems. But I think that the application here applies exactly the same way as it would for a not-for-profit. In fact, maybe even more critically so, because they have to become very, very good at telling their story to those potential people that are going to fund them, whether it be a state or federal entity or private donations that they're surviving on. So absolute application, we haven't done anything specifically yet. I do suspect that some of those metrics are going to be very, very different, but the principles we've talked about today are clearly applicable to not-for-profits.
Okay, thank you. Someone's kind of taking us back to one of your slides up, getting started. If someone is just getting started, is there a number of metrics? I know it's hard by industry, but is it, would you say 3 to 5, or what do you think is a good number to start with, or does it matter on what they think drives the business?
I think again, if we're talking about the overall business, I would try to limit that to 3, and then if we're talking about different disciplines, try to limit each of those to 3. At least for now, the more metrics that we have to look at. And I think this is a good question because it really identifies even our very large organization. If we build so complex and we're trying to track so many different things, eventually we lose interest, or we gloss over, or even if there's 10 metrics there, we have a tendency to still go look at the 1 or 2 that we care about and then move forward. So I think if you're just getting started at a company level, try to limit those metrics to 3. For each discipline, try to limit to 3, but you could have 5 or 10, or depending on how you look at it, even more disciplines. The overall leaders probably aren't looking at every one of those disciplines every week, but whoever's in charge of that, the leaders within those disciplines certainly should be, just like the overall management team should be looking at the 3 every day.
Okay, great. I think you mentioned this, but just for clarification, someone's asking a question. Is it pretty easy to slice and dice access to what specific users can see and can only see metrics that are relevant to them, and even only pieces maybe of metrics or how they're driving the metrics?
Yeah, and I think that's one of my favorite parts about the technology that's really transformed this, because with what we're doing now, continually, every month as we meet with our clients inevitably are saying, that piece of that scoreboard, I need such and such in the organization to see. And so it's a scalable, the software that we use is based on a monthly license fee, and so it's easy for us just to add another license, and for specific individuals we can give them access to just certain scoreboards. And so it's one of the best parts, because if you've done all this effort and you've built out these great scoreboards, you want to be able to then leverage them with everyone else in your organization. And today's technology really does allow for that very easily, and it's one of the great parts. I was at a client just a few weeks ago, and we were looking at metrics, and he said, I need my salesperson to see that piece, and that piece. And we said, okay, great, we'll go build that real quick, and then we'll give that salesperson access. But yes, the current technology is doing a great job with that.
Okay, great. I have time for a few more questions here. Someone's asking a question about the data integrability question. You know, it seems as if you're trying to pull in data from multiple sources here. Are you dealing with flat files, and what are the biggest challenges that companies seem to face on getting this information all into one place?
Well, I think there's a lot of flexibility in some of these software packages. Now, our current group, with the software program that we're using, they've had an enterprise version for a number of years, and they released their cloud version at the beginning of 2011, so it's only been available for about the last 18 months. One of the things for us is we selected a product that gave us great flexibility that we could pull the data into a source that we knew how to work with. But a lot of these programs, they've got some very talented people at those software companies that can help you link up and really provide that. So if you have a very complex set of structure where your data is coming from, they can really do a good job of helping you get that integrated. For us, some of what we're doing is grabbing for historical, some of it we're simply exporting from the accounting system. We're putting in a data structure that identifies any changes. We get red flags if new chart of accounts have been added or new metrics have been added, and that helps us to go and make sure that we put it back together before the scoreboards are uploaded. But they've built tools to automatically refresh data, and there's all kinds of ways to approach that. So that question is a great question. What I would say to that is, if you're a very small organization, there's a great way of doing it, all the way up to the very largest organizations. Clearly the complexity with the number of data sources we're pulling from and the complexity of that data, that's going to change the process a little bit. But from a principal standpoint, it's available to all of us now.
Okay, great. A few more questions. We'd like to tap into your great knowledge in the amount of experience you have across companies. You know, as you mentioned, some companies you go in there and you get the scorecards, and then you really have to scrap those scorecards. Can you give us, you know, 2 or 3 areas in which companies in general have been off in what they think their scorecards are gonna show? And then the second part of that is on the other side of it, the companies that you've seen that have kind of done it right out of the box. What kind of preparation have they done to do it right?
So let me answer the second one first. And you know, our experience with our clients, again, we are a provider of CFO products and services. So with the companies, we've certainly walked into companies who tried it in some way, form, or fashion, and it hasn't gone well. But we weren't necessarily around during those times. And with our clients, we're kind of launching our scoreboards. And so I think we've seen in every case that we've done this, we've built this in a way where we're going to have success. Now, so I guess I don't have as much experience in watching some of the failed experiences of some of the organizations. To your first question, it's an interesting thing because I had one client recently who's really changed their model, and they had certain assumptions about what was going to happen as they changed that model, but it wasn't bearing out. And so I was asking myself the question, where did we not understand our metrics? Where did we go wrong? And so as I dug into it, I actually used the scoreboards as my tool to analyze, and at the end of it, I had my answers. I had them all on a scoreboard, met with the client, and they had one of those, wow, okay, so we misunderstood a couple of the changes that are occurring. And so, again, a lot of this, as much as it is as a presentation tool for our management team, these can also be very, very useful in some cases taking the place of what we may have used Excel for and really helping us understand and put the metrics side by side and see if we can come up with patterns. So hopefully that gives a kind of an example of what we've seen.
Okay, great. One final question. In the arena of scoreboards, what's next?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, for us, I'll tell you what we're working on now is we are looking for that automatic integration with some of the accounting systems where we can see really real-time data when it comes to inventory, accounts receivable, POs that are outstanding, accounts payable outstanding, overdue balances and things like that. So where we're headed is really that even deeper level of integration so that we can use it as the tools. I'm very excited about where the software itself is heading. One of the really exciting places it's heading is the very visually interactive charts. And so basically as your scoreboards come up, you can have your pictures of your team or your facilities popping up at the same time. A lot of changes in that area to really help kind of tell the story better. Exciting things ahead for sure.
Great. Thank you very much with that. I'd like to close the Q&A session. We'd like to thank Tim for his time and insights. Those of you in the audience, if you'd like us to connect you directly with Tim, please indicate that on the survey that we'll ask you to take immediately following conclusion of the webinar. Tim is clearly a leader in his field and an excellent source of information on today's topics. Thanks again to today's sponsor, Profix, whose commitment to thought leadership allows us to offer such great educational programs. If you have any questions on the CPE front, please email your questions to Chris Brower, cbrower@proformative.com. Again, when the webinar is over, we appreciate your consideration in taking the survey so we can improve the ROI. Finally, as I close the webinar, I would like to thank the audience for your valuable time, and we look forward to seeing you on Proformative.com and at future events. Thank you very much. Have a great day.